Good mor- Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yes. Good morning.
I'm using a new computer today. So, and how's the picture? Does the picture look the same, better, or worse than what you're used to seeing?
It looks about the same. I think we're seeing a bit more of a background.
Oh, okay, because maybe the camera's a little bit further away. All right. Okay, thanks. Okay, so just to review where we were yesterday, the um, the Imrei Yaakov in his Biurim had clarified for us that um, when it comes to modern day commercial trade, he talked about this concept from the Middle Ages called a merupia, which was where a Jew has established a transactional relationship with a non-Jew, which is not based on solid ground. Like there's no contract, there's just a pattern of business activity. And because of the very tentative nature of that business relationship, um, there are poskim in the Shulchan Aruch who do permit other Jews to try to uh, um, uh, entice the non-Jew to give them the business. And there, the Ramah had suggested that it might be permitted in that situation, at least according to some opinions, it would be permitted in that situation because there's no real substantial um, connection between, a business connection between the Jew and the non-Jew. And it was on that basis that, here, let me just see. Right. And the Ramah had said some people permitted and some people prohibited. And that's really the basis of our halacha. And the Rav Shulchan Aruch had said it depends upon the nature of the place and the time and the situation. And on that, we saw yesterday in the Biurim that the Imrei Yaakov had suggested that in many instances in today's world, even when you're not dealing with non-Jews in the Middle Ages, where Jews were at a distinct disadvantage and there was no real way for a Jew to gain a solid footing in a transactional relationship with non-Jews, but even today, in a very open market, where a person already has an established account with a vendor or someone who sells insurance or things like that, he said that there's a possible way to defend someone who would be making cold calls. And in the course of making cold calls, he realizes that he's trying to take the business away from even a fellow Jew because, again, the nature of business relationships is so tentative in many industries today that there's no such thing as saying, hey, this is my client or this is my customer, you have to stay away. It all depends on the industry and it all depends on the situation. And I hope that you're able to sort of think about different illustrations in your own mind in the industry that you're in, and to let me know if you have a dilemma about that. But again, it's one of those gray areas where you have to think really hard in trying to get the business, or maybe switching my business from Jewish person number one to Jewish person number two. Is there an act of, is there a breach of ethics that is taking place over here? How does it feel? How reliant is Jew number one on my business? Or how, to the point where I might be betraying his a reliance that he has on me. And conversely, do I have a right to compete in a market where I'm the number two guy and Jew number one has already established a relationship? Okay. So, and then at the end of the discussion yesterday, Ron sort of wanted to get in a question about ancient history in Toronto. about different shuls opening up and different Jewish institutions opening up. Look, you know, so I was thinking about how to respond, and I guess I would respond in at least one way initially in thinking about it. The way I would respond would be as follows. It's a very, first of all, very, very legitimate question. One of the things, you know, we're all big boys, right? You know, we've all been around the block a number of times and we understand human nature. Just because a person has the word rabbi in front of his name and they have a beard and they wear tzitzis doesn't mean that they're an angel. You know, everyone is a human being. Everyone is fallible and everyone is given to human foibles and failings. And even someone who provides you with spiritual guidance is themselves a flawed individual. And so you have to, one of the difficulties that people have when they take a Rebbe upon themselves, when they take a spiritual mentor or guide upon themselves is, and it's just like a parent sometimes, is that as we get older and we mature, we start to recognize our parents not only as being parental beings, but also as human beings. And as we get older and we recognize that a person may be endowed with great wisdom and great piety, but they still are human beings. And human beings can get jealous, and human beings can have ambitions for their own unique power base and their own desire to do things the way they feel they should be done, in contrast with the way that other people want it done. And a lot of times those objectives are virtuous, and there are times when they're not so virtuous, and there are times when they're a combination of both virtue and selfishness. And it's very complicated. That's just the way life is. And that's the reason why you sometimes have so many different Jewish institutions which offer different shades of the same product, because everyone wants to do it their own way. There's that certain human nature that, you know, everyone is endowed with the Spirit of God, with the image of God, right? We're all created in God's image. Well, that godly aspiration drives us to want to be creative and to want to form things in our own image, just like God formed man in his own image. And so sometimes it's difficult for a human being with a human personality to conform to the way other people want things done. I'm chewing the philosophical fat, as it were, at this point. But the point is that we have to be careful not to allow those kinds of ambitions to destroy the sense of unity in a community. And sometimes the rabbinic leaders of the community can take the lead on making sure that the community stays united. But there are other times when the laity, when the students have to take that responsibility upon themselves. And it becomes the responsibility of the balabayit, as it were, to take upon himself or herself that responsibility of maintaining some semblance of unity. It's also unfortunate that when we have limited assets to be able to support Jewish causes and charities, that sometimes there's so many duplications of services because everyone wants things in just the special niche that they want them. You know, we live in a world today where we've seen, and I've talked about this before, we've seen a shtibalization of North American Jewry. And what I mean by shtibalization is that the one-size-fits-all synagogue doesn't seem to work anymore. It hasn't worked for a very long time, where everyone, you know, there's one shul in the city, and everyone joins that shul, and the favorite pastime is to complain about the air conditioning, the rabbi, the president, and the carpeting, or what, put together your top 10 list, and you complain about those things, and then you move on and you keep patronizing that one shul. Well, today, because of increased wealth and because of an expectation that we don't need to compromise on consumable goods, right? I mean, um, consider the fact that when you want a cup of coffee, you have a dozen choices of where to get your coffee. And then when you go to that individual coffee shop, you have over a dozen choices about what kind of cup of coffee you're going to have. Is it going to be vanilla? Is it going to be or blonde? Is it going to be dark roast, light roast, Colombian, Venezuelan, Arabic? All of these different kinds of varieties, and then the additives and the flavorings, and you get to make the cup of coffee exactly the way you want it. And so the world has developed in such a way where individual privilege of I want it exactly how I want it, not how someone else thinks it ought to be, has become the standard. And as a result, people have this ambition and drive to create the Jewish institution exactly the way they want it. And if there's any deviation in the big place, well, they'll put up a shingle and open up another place, and that's just become the standard. So you can't you can jump up and down and point to a sefer and say, well, this was unethical and this was wrong, but it's going to happen anyway. And then the choice, and then the decision that you have to make is, well, how do I react to it? And sometimes the reaction, even against an injustice, can also be itself unjust if we overreact or we react with hatred and malice instead of just basically looking the other way and just saying, look, I got to do my own thing, and I'm not going to allow this to consume me. So those are my initial thoughts, Ron. I don't know if that helps you at all. Maybe it's too philosophical, and maybe you're looking for something more basic, but that's all I can help you with right now.
My only question to that would be that for the in this particular scenario where you have people who are members of a shul, and then they have this, let's say, satellite shul. So on the one hand, they've established this rabbi who's part of the satellite shul. Let's say he's become their sort of rav, but on the other hand, they've made a commitment to the shul and where this rabbi was, and they've been part of the this particular congregation. And now for them leaving, they're as a mass group, they are really hurting that particular institution. So don't they have a chiyuv to be somewhat responsible for the institution that they're leaving as a mass group?
Well, yeah, I mean, going back to our discussion of the Rosh Yeshiva who left the yeshiva and opened up his own place. Rav Gestetner had written this tshuva in the late 20th century, and he felt that, yes, that Rosh Yeshiva has a financial responsibility. But, in today's world, good luck on trying to make that stick. Which Beit Din are you going to go to in order to seek justice in a situation like that? Should these people feel a financial obligation if they had gotten their religious start in institution A, right, where Rabbi so-and-so was part of the staff, and then Rabbi so-and-so decides to say, I'm not happy with the way this institution is running. I need more individual expression, so I'm going to open up another place down the road. And he takes a big chunk of that group with him. And now that original group A is now struggling, right? So yes, that was exactly the example of the yeshiva, right? So Rav Gestetner says, yes, the group A, which had cultivated this whole movement, let's say in the situation you may be describing, like a whole Baal Tshuva movement, and got these people their start. These people should feel a financial obligation, and anyone who patronized the original institution should feel that should feel a sense of financial duty. But then again, for how long? How many years is that? For all of perpetuity, for the rest of their lives, for the rest of the life of the institution? No, there has to be you have to put a cap on it at some point and say, okay, we've all moved on. It's been 20 years or however long it's been. Let's everyone just move on. Okay. All right. So let me share my screen. So, and again, I'm working with a new system, so if it's a little bit more clunky today, I apologize. Okay, so what we were seeing before is that the Imrei Yaakov had said that there are those people who opine that when you're doing business with a Gentile, and Reuven has already established a business relationship with the non-Jew, so then another Jew, some say he is allowed to entice the Gentile, and some say that he's not allowed to entice the Gentile to come and give him the business instead. And the conclusion of the Rav Shulchan Aruch is v'yirei shamayim yachmir la'atzmo b'chol makom. And a God-fearing person should try to be more stringent whenever possible, and make sure that he doesn't in any way curtail the parnasa of a fellow Jew through his own business ambitions. Okay, avol mutter min hadin livnei ha'ir le'reid echad betoch umnut chavero. But here's what is permissible, and that is, even when up until now we've been talking about let's say going after a particular individual to seek out their business when you know that another Jew already is in a business relationship with that individual. But what about appealing to the public, going out to the public market and setting up a shingle which will place you in direct competition with a fellow Jew? He says that, according to everyone, is permissible. Kigon. So, for example, lahoshiv chanut bitzad chanut, to set up one store next to another, the store of your friend, v'chein chayat bitzad chayat, or a tailor, as an illustration, next door to another tailor. Okay, and the reason why that's permitted, and I'm just, the classic example that we've talked about before is the two Lafa stores on Batzer Street, which I think, what was not in our neighborhood, but there was a few years ago, there was a falling out between two partners, and one of them basically broke away and opened up his Lafa place on Bather Street, and then a guy, the other partner, opened up a competing Lafa place, literally like 2 or 3 doors down, and they both were able to get COR certification. And the argument being, based on this halacha, is that anyone can open up a competing operation, and the reason is mipnei sheyachol lomar lo mi sheba etzlecha yavo u'mi sheyavo etzli yavo. And the argument being, whoever comes to you can come to you, and whoever comes to me will come to me. And it's an open market, and let whatever and whoever provides better customer service and a better product will get the customers. No one's stopping you from upping your game just because I've opened up a store down the block. Doesn't prevent you from getting the customers that will come to you. So that's the argument. Now, there is at a certain point where this will not be tenable. Okay, at a certain point, it may be necessary for the dayanim, for the judges of the city, to step in if they perceive, and we alluded to this, I think, in one of our sources before, if they perceive that the new competitor who comes in will cause absolute ruination to the original service provider, meaning that either because he's doing some kind of competition which is underhanded, such as he's offering a product at a deeply discounted price and is offering it at a loss, or he's doing other kinds of business practices, or even if he's completely legit, but the market for that particular product simply cannot sustain two vendors. Okay, so if you're selling shawarma and laffa, okay, we can probably sustain, I don't know, it was just a new place that opened up north of us, right? So the argument is, I guess, well, the community is big enough. We've got probably about 20,000 Jews in Thornhill, and a large portion of them are like Israeli food, Mediterranean food, and the market can bear additional restaurants to serve the Jewish community, and let the market bear what it'll bear, you know. And no one can say, well, you're putting me out of business by opening up your place. The second person can say, what are you talking about? There's still plenty of business out there. Just up your game, do better advertising, get out there on social media, put out your ads, offer specials, and people will come to you, right? And the fact of the matter is that in the food business, if we wanted to go there for a second, I mean, I've been on social media these last several months during the pandemic, and it's been absolute a disaster for caterers, for restaurants. And when the going gets tough, you've got a lot of people who really, really push themselves to make things work. And in the kosher market, you've got a lot of caterers and restaurants who have made a point of schwitzing to the, and working really, really hard to get the word out to the public, to offer premiums and specials and put out good advertising, and they're successful. And there are other caterers and other restaurants who aren't as successful because they simply haven't made the same amount of effort to go out there and offer specials and make themselves visible to the consumer on the street. And that's essentially the argument that's being made over here. You can't stop me from appealing to the public. It's one thing to go after a particular customer when there's a special transactional business relationship between two individual parties. But to make myself available to the public, let the best man win. We want there to be free enterprise in an open market, because ultimately the consumer will benefit the most, because when you have competing businesses, ultimately the consumer will benefit from having more choices, more goods, and better prices. Okay. Umuter lechen v'ni hasheni lechalek klayos ve'egozim letinokos v'lishfachos hashluchot lachanut liknot kidei sheyavo etzlo liknot. And furthermore, not only is it permissible for Shimon to open up his store next to Reuven's store, but it's also permitted for Shimon to distribute parched grain and nuts, or it's, snacks or prizes or sweets to the children and to the housekeepers who are sent to do the shopping for the household, as a means of enticing them to come shop at his market. And why is that permitted? Why is it permitted to entice the consumer by offering them special goods as a means of enticing them to shop? Because Shimon can say to Reuven, if Reuven says, hey, that's not fair, you're enticing all the customers by giving them delicious roasted nuts, walnuts. Well, so Shimon can turn around to Reuven, I'm giving out walnuts, you give out almonds. Who's stopping you from offering the consumer the same thing? I'm not telling you not to entice customers. I'm enticing customers in my way. You entice customers in your way. Look how many supermarkets we've got now in the small little radius of Thornhill, right? Now you've got Sobeys has got to run for its money now. You got No Frills. You got now Justin opened up this new place. What's it called on Steeles and Bathurst, where Justin just opened up. What is it called? Is it Food Basics? I don't know.
It's called Freshco.
Freshco,
Yeah.
and so what are you going to say? Hey, Sobeys is going to say, hey, we were the first kosher market in the neighborhood. What chutzpah for you people to start expanding the kosher, your kosher offerings. You're taking away our business. And there's no question that Sobeys must be hurting from all of these new competitors. So what do these competitors say? We're offering sales. We're advertising on social media. We're getting the word out. If you want to entice your customers, keep up, man. Because ultimately, who's benefiting from all of these sales? Kosher consumer, right? So there's nothing that's stopping you from doing the same thing that I'm doing. And there's nothing wrong. It's completely legitimate for the competitor to either lower prices or to offer more for the same price, to make sure that the box that in which you get these goods is larger than what it used to be. Because the original person can easily do the same thing. In other words, I'm not stopping you from doing what I'm doing by lowering prices. Now, there does become a limit to that, as I mentioned. If the person is doing what's called dumping, where they are making the price lower than their own cost, so then it becomes more complicated. Let's say they have deeper pockets, like a Walmart or something like that. So we're going to see some more details of this halacha, because this is even though it's only one seif in the Rav Shulchan Aruch, there are a lot of details. But let's just finish the text first. Lefichach eino keposek chayav, and therefore a competitor who opens up shop next door to the first guy is not taking away his livelihood. He may be forcing the first guy to work harder. He may be forcing him to up his game, but he's not taking away his parnasa, because the first guy can do the same thing that he is doing. However, with all of that said, it is still considered an act of piety to not compete with a fellow Jew in the exact same business, trying to take the exact same market. And the reason is because Shenemar, as it says in Mishlei, fortunate is the man who has not defiled his friend's wife. And that's a metaphor, right? This refers to someone who did not invade his friend's turf and try to compete with him in the same market. Okay, so that's the basic halacha. Questions, comments before we start the Imrei Yaakov? Anyone have questions? Statements? Suggestions? Okay, if not, we'll hold it here for today, and we'll continue Emir Tzashem on this. We'll do the Imrei Yaakov tomorrow.